Imagine a character, right? Someone known across the entire realm as the Holy Maiden.
Oh, the classic trope.
Exactly. Picture her, serene, deeply kind, bathed in the eternal light of a sacred flame.
Hands clasped in perpetual prayer, of course.
Right. Now, imagine that her defining psychological trait isn't some innate divine purity.
Well, what is it then?
It's actually a crippling, self-imposed emotional deep freeze, one born from, frankly, catastrophic childhood trauma.
Wow, okay, that is a massive shift.
Yeah, today we are taking a deep dive into the source material to completely dismantle the cliché of Ophilia Clement.
Because beneath that luminous exterior, there's a devastating psychological study going on.
It really is. It's a study of grief, the terrifying transactionality of love, and a desperate rebellion against a profoundly cruel universe.
I mean, the trope of the pious cleric is usually treated as a totally static archetype, right?
Right, like a paragon of virtue who just exists to heal others.
Exactly. But when we strip away the vestments and the holy magic in this story, what we artfully find is an architecture of ice.
An architecture of ice. I love that phrasing.
It's true, though. She's a young woman who basically locked herself in a mental cellar just to survive the unbearable weight of her own reality.
And whether you're a gamer, a writer, or just someone fascinated by human resilience, this deep dive is going to give you some massive aha moments.
Because video games really are a sophisticated narrative medium. They use these established archetypes as a Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse for what, exactly?
To deliver incredibly complex treatises on how we process grief and how we find belonging.
And for those of you listening who know the continent of Orstera, you know the environment isn't just a backdrop.
No, not at all. It is a thematic mirror.
Right. When we look at the Frostlands, the northernmost region of this world, it's not merely a place where it happens to snow.
It's oppressive.
It is. The biting year-round wind and the blinding whiteouts, they are a literal manifestation of hostility to warmth.
It's an environment where survival requires constant hypervigilance.
The cold is, well, it's an ever-present suffocating antagonist.
Which makes the placement of St. Bridge Cathedral in the dead center of that wasteland so poignant, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. You have this massive, unyielding expanse of freezing indifference outside.
And then inside, this singular, desperate beacon of the sacred flame.
That physical contrast, the freezing wasteland pressing in on a fragile, flickering warmth, that is the exact blueprint of our protagonist's internal emotional landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly grasp her journey, we have to recognize that she wasn't always this radiant figure.
Right, when she first arrived in St. Bridge 15 years ago, right after the war, she wasn't some bubbly, grateful orphan.
Eager to embrace the light. No, she was completely, totally closed off.
The psychological mechanics of a child experiencing the violent severing of every familial bond are just horrific.
When a child loses everyone in an instant, to an arbitrary act of war no less, their developing brain simply cannot process a betrayal of that magnitude.
By the universe itself, yeah. The fundamental understanding of safety is just shattered.
So the subconscious mind initiates a drastic defensive protocol.
Right, it severs the capacity for attachment.
The logic is as simple as it is tragic. If I do not allow myself to love anyone ever again, I cannot be destroyed when they are violently taken from me.
She internalized the Frostlands. She built this fortress of absolute emotional detachment.
And even when Archbishop Joseph took her in, right?
Yeah, and he treated her with the exact same warmth and devotion as his biological daughter, Liana.
Even then, Ophilia couldn't just magically thaw out.
She suffered from a staggering case of imposter syndrome.
She felt like an interloper, like a shivering stray allowed to sit near the fire, but entirely unworthy of its heat.
The terminology the sources use to describe this state, the mental ice cellar, it's incredibly apt.
It really implies not just coldness, but active imprisonment.
She locked herself away. Even surrounded by the literal warmth of Elfric's sacred flame, she believed her core was fundamentally broken.
She viewed herself as an anomaly in this pristine, holy environment.
I really want to visualize this for you, the listener, because the contrast between how she feels internally and how she presents externally is stark.
It's massive.
Think about a magnificent stained glass window in that very cathedral.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
From the outside, when the midday light hits it, it looks perfect. Luminous, seamless, a flawless image of divine peace.
Right, a complete picture.
But if you walk right up to it, if you drag your fingers across the surface and look incredibly closely at the dark lead caming holding the whole thing together.
The structural lines.
Yeah. you realize it is actually a mosaic of shattered pieces. The glass was violently broken.
And those heavy lead lines are the thick, agonizing scars of a desperate reconstruction.
Exactly. To build on that stained glass analogy, that heavy lead binding those pieces together isn't natural.
No, it requires intense heat and painful, meticulous labor to forge.
In Ophilia's case, that binding agent is her sheer agonizing willpower.
The window isn't whole. It is being held together by a mind exercising constant, exhausting hypervigilance,
Just to ensure the pieces don't fall apart again.
which completely upends how society, and media in general, tends to interpret kindness.
We have this deeply ingrained habit, right? We look at the holy maiden archetype, and we assume a naive, default setting of goodness.
We assume she is pure because she is somehow untouched by the horrors of the world.
Like she just lacks complex negative emotions entirely.
We constantly mistake kindness for a lack of damage.
Wow, yes. But Ophilia's narrative aggressively subverts that assumption.
Her gentle disposition, her willingness to heal and comfort others, these are not innate, effortless traits.
They are a deliberate, exhausting, and fiercely courageous choice made every single day.
In the direct aftermath of extreme trauma, no less.
She knows exactly how terrifying and cruel the universe is. She's seen the absolute worst of human destruction.
And yet, she looks at that freezing void and actively chooses to project warmth.
It takes an unfathomable amount of strength to be kind when you have empirical proof of the world's absolute malice.
It is about reclaiming agency. The war stripped her of all power.
The deaths of her parents happened to her. The displacement happened to her.
But by stepping out of that mental ice cellar, by deliberately choosing to embody the warmth of the sacred flame.
Despite her paralyzing terror of experiencing loss again.
Exactly. She is taking control of her narrative. Her kindness is not passivity.
Her kindness is her rebellion.
It is a defiant strike against the cruelty of the world.
Her kindness is her rebellion. I absolutely love that framing.
It's powerful.
But that rebellion is incredibly costly, right?
Oh, vastly.
Well-
That internal struggle, the constant need to police her own shattered pieces and prove she deserves to stand in the light.
It sets a psychological trap.
And this trap is exactly what triggers the inciting incident of her entire journey.
The monumental event known as the Kindling.
The kindling is brilliant because it functions as the classic hero's call to action, but it is deeply recontextualized.
Right, it's a psychological coping mechanism. So every 20 years, the designated cleric must take the sacred flame from Saintbridge.
And carry it on a physically brutal pilgrimage across the entire continent.
Just to reignite the world's elemental flames, it is a massive, crushing responsibility.
And it was supposed to be Liana's responsibility.
Right. As the Archbishop's biological daughter, the duty naturally fell to her.
But then the narrative throws a huge wrench into the works. Archbishop Joseph falls gravely ill.
He is basically on his deathbed, and Liana, facing the imminent loss of her father, completely shuts down.
She is paralyzed by anticipatory grief.
She physically and emotionally cannot abandon her dying father to walk across the continent.
The sheer weight of the pilgrimage is immense, but is nothing compared to the weight of the grief anchoring Liana to that bedside.
She is shattered. So Ophilia steps in.
She volunteers to take the flame.
She assumes the burden, dons the heavy robes, and sets out into the freezing wind so her sister can stay home and mourn.
Now, if we are just looking at the surface mechanics of the plot, this is the ultimate act of heroic selflessness.
Yeah, wait, isn't this just classic hero selflessness? She loves her sister, she's saving her from an impossible burden. Why are we analyzing this as something darker?
Because of the psychological architecture we just built. There is a much darker, much more desperate mechanism at play here.
Okay, lay it out for me.
We have to look at the psychological concept of compensation. This sacrifice is not pure, unadulterated altruism.
It's tethered to something else.
It is inextricably tethered to her survivor's guilt and her lingering imposter syndrome.
Deep down, that terrified orphan in the ice cellar still believes her place in this family is conditional.
She believes she was a burden they generously took on.
She is trying to pay back a debt that Joseph and Liana never actually assigned to her.
She feels she has to pay rent on their love.
Wow, pay rent on their love, that's devastating.
Precisely the mechanism. It is a transactional view of affection born directly from trauma.
Subconsciously, she views the kindling as the ultimate currency.
If she can endure this impossible suffering, if she can carry the weight of the world's light on her shoulders.
Then maybe, finally, she will have definitively earned the sense of belonging she has desperately craved for 15 years.
She is attempting to buy her permanent residency in their hearts through self-sacrifice.
Like, if I suffer enough for you, my existence here is justified. I am no longer a stray, I am a savior.
It is a devastating emotional ledger she is trying to balance.
And it is a ledger that only exists in her own mind. Neither Liana nor Joseph ever viewed her as a transaction.
But trauma forces the mind to constantly seek concrete proof of safety.
The pilgrimage provides a tangible, physical ordeal to validate an intangible emotional insecurity.
Let's take a beat and let you, the listener, reflect on that mechanism.
Yeah, because while you aren't carrying magical flames across a continent, that psychological drive is incredibly universal.
Think about the dynamic in your own life.
When you take on the lion's share of emotional labor in a relationship, or when you work yourself to the bone covering for colleagues,
Or when you constantly swallow your own needs to accommodate a partner.
are you always acting out of pure, joyous generosity?
Or is there a terrified part of you operating on compensation?
Are you subconsciously trying to make yourself so undeniably useful, so utterly indispensable that they wouldn't dare abandon you?
It is a sobering reflection. We are remarkably adept at dressing up our deepest, most desperate insecurities as towering virtues.
We label it devotion, or loyalty, or being a team player.
But beneath the noble labels, it is often just an exhausted inner child frantically trying to earn the right to stay in the warmth.
Ophilia is carrying the physical light of the world, but internally she is dragging the crushing, suffocating weight of her own perceived inadequacy.
And the brilliance of this narrative is that it doesn't just show us Ophilia's struggle. It gives us the ultimate foil.
Right. To truly understand the magnitude of her choice to step into the light, we have to examine the terrifying alternative.
We have to look at what happens when a mind faces that exact same apocalyptic trauma and makes the exact opposite choice.
We are looking at the thematic mirror image, the absolute shadow to her light.
The character of Mattias.
Mattias is the antagonist of her journey, but calling him a villain almost feels too simple, honestly.
His backstory is a study in historical entrenched pain.
We have to shift the timeline back 115 years. This isn't a recent wound.
No, this is a century-old, festering ideological collapse.
Over a century ago, Mattias was the exact same archetype as Ophilia.
He was an incredibly devout priest, a man who dedicated his entire existence to the Church of the Sacred Flame.
And the well-being of his parish. His faith was absolute.
Until the day a catastrophic fire swept through his town.
This wasn't just a tragedy, it was an inferno that consumed every single thing he held dear.
The community he nurtured, the people he loved, the sanctuary he tended, all of it was being reduced to ash right in front of his eyes.
And the imagery in the sources here is just haunting.
You have a man standing amidst roaring flames, choking on the smoke of his burning world, and he falls to his knees.
He does exactly what he has been trained to do his entire life. He prays.
He begs the heavens, he begs the 13 gods, he begs Aelfric the Flamebringer for a miracle.
He screams into the sky for salvation.
And what he receives is the most terrifying sound in the universe.
Absolute silence.
The gods do not descend, the flames do not part.
The fire burns until there is nothing left but charred timber and corpses.
That is the sound of a worldview violently snapping in half.
The silence of the gods in the face of immense suffering. It's the classic problem of theodicy.
If God is entirely good and entirely powerful, why does evil exist? Why did the parish burn?
In that moment of profound, echoing divine silence, the sacred flame within Mattias' own soul was instantly and permanently extinguished.
He looked up at the heavens and realized there was no benevolent protector.
There was only an empty, indifferent void that allows arbitrary cruelty.
And a mind that has been anchored in absolute faith simply cannot survive a sudden shift to absolute randomness. It broke him.
He couldn't accept a universe where chaos dictates who lives and who dies in agony.
So he didn't just abandon his faith, he violently inverted it.
He turned to Galdera, the fallen, the dark god of the Orstera pantheon.
And it is crucial to understand why. Mattias didn't seek out Galdera because he suddenly developed a taste for cartoonish evil.
Right, he sought out the dark god to gain absolute, undeniable power over life and death.
He forged a twisted, yet internally consistent, nihilistic philosophy.
A god who refuses to manifest miracles to stop pain is a false god.
He decided that if the heavens refused to control the chaos, he would find a power that allowed him to control it.
He traded the vulnerable hope of faith for the cold, absolute certainty of dark magic.
And here we must acknowledge the broader narrative currents of Orstera. Mattias' fall wasn't entirely in a vacuum.
A collapse of faith that monumental creates a psychological vulnerability.
A crack in the soul that is ripe for exploitation. While Mattias believes he is seizing power, he's actually being subtly directed.
He becomes a pawn for Lilac, the orchestrator working in the shadows to unseal Galdera.
Lilac feeds on collapsed faith. She saw a man whose heart was a crater of ash and filled it with the promise of absolute control.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's lay these two characters completely bare, side by side.
Look at the architecture of their trauma.
Ophilia watched her entire family ripped away by the senseless violence of war.
Mattias watched his entire parish ripped away by the senseless violence of fire.
Both of them stood shivering in the absolute ruins of their lives.
Both of them looked up, desperate for intervention, and faced the horrific, deafening silence of the universe.
The gods did not stop the war. The gods did not stop the fire.
They both suffered the ultimate betrayal, the realization of the universe's complete and utter indifference to human agony.
Exactly. Trauma acts like a prism here. You have this single, blindingly painful beam of suffering that strikes them both.
It is the exact same wavelength of despair.
But it hits the prism of their individual consciousness, and it refracts into two diametrically opposed philosophies.
Mattias refracts into a demand for absolute power. He becomes an entity of control.
Ophilia refracts into, well, how do we encapsulate her philosophy in direct opposition to his?
This is the crux of their entire philosophical war. Mattias embodies a deeply entitled theology.
He demands that faith must act as a transactional shield.
I prayed, I was devoted. Therefore, you must deliver a physics-defying miracle to save me.
And when the universe fails to uphold its end of this imagined contract, he declares all of existence worthless.
He demands a God who will fix the broken world from the top down.
But Ophilia, forged in the exact same silent crucible, arrives at a profoundly grounded, deeply humanist belief.
Her time in the mental ice cellar taught her that faith isn't a magic spell you cast to erase pain.
Faith isn't waiting for a miraculous divine hand to descend from the clouds and put the shattered glass back together.
Faith is about the lead caming. It is about mortal, deeply flawed, terrified human beings.
Looking at the agonizing cold of the world and choosing to keep each other warm anyway.
Mattias looks at the silent sky and curses it for being empty.
Ophilia looks at the silent sky, accepts the terrifying reality that no deity is coming to save them, and realizes we only have each other.
If the sky is cold, I must be the fire.
She understands that the value of the sacred flame isn't in its magical properties.
Its value is that it acts as a rallying point for human solidarity.
Mattias wants to become a god to eradicate pain. Ophilia just wants to be a person who sits with you while you hurt.
It is a staggering philosophical clash.
And what elevates this from a good story to an absolute masterpiece of narrative design is that this clash isn't just confined to the text.
Oh, not at all. The developers wove this exact psychological tension directly into the sensory experience.
If you listen to how Yasunori Nishiki composed Ophilia's main theme music, you can literally hear her imposter syndrome.
And her silent rebellion. The auditory storytelling here is phenomenal.
Nishiki doesn't just write background music. He writes psychological profiles and sheet music.
Let's analyze the opening moments of her theme piece. Nishiki anchors the entire composition on a very specific, carefully chosen harmonic structure.
The add 11 chord.
Yes.
For those of us listening who appreciate the emotional swell of the music but lack a degree in music theory, break down the mechanics of an add 11 chord for us.
Gladly.
What exactly is happening acoustically, and why does it sound the way it does?
To understand the add 11, you first have to understand a standard major chord.
Okay.
A standard major triad, built on a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth, is acoustically stable.
The sound waves align perfectly.
It feels resolved, happy, completely at peace.
But an add 11 chord takes that stable, peaceful foundation and forcibly introduces the 11th note of the scale into the mix.
This specific interval creates what we call acoustic friction.
It's not a harsh, ugly dissonance, though. It doesn't sound like someone smashing keys on a piano.
No, it is a highly controlled, delicate dissonance. The frequencies of the major third and the 11th rub against each other slightly.
It creates a suspended, yearning tension. It refuses to fully resolve.
It creates a resonance that feels undeniably holy and ethereal, but inherently deeply conflicted,
It sounds like it is reaching for a state of peace it can never quite grasp.
which is the exact auditory manifestation of the psychology we just spent the last half hour dissecting.
Precisely. The root of the chord, the stable foundation, represents the heavy, ancient, unyielding mission of the cleric.
The rigid dogma of the church.
But that added 11th, that persistent note of harmonic tension and yearning, is the sonic equivalent of the mental ice cellar.
It represents the profound loneliness, the gnawing insecurity.
And the intense vulnerability of an ordinary, traumatized young woman who is absolutely terrified she isn't good enough to hold the light.
Her imposter syndrome is literally baked into the harmonic frequency of the game.
And the brilliance of the composition goes even further when you look at the instrumentation Nishiki selected to carry those chords.
We have a massive contrast between two very specific instruments.
Let's look at the mechanical nature of those instruments. On one side, carrying the main delicate melody, is the flute.
Acoustically, the flute is driven entirely by human breath. It is fragile, intimate, and requires a gentle, constant exhalation.
It functions as Ophilia's inner monologue, her quiet confession. It is the voice of the fragile human spirit.
It sounds like a single, solitary person standing in the middle of a vast, empty cathedral,
Quietly humming to themselves to stave off the dark.
but constantly swelling underneath that delicate flute, supporting it but also constantly threatening to completely drown it out, is the pipe organ.
Now think about the mechanics of a pipe organ. It doesn't use human breath.
It requires massive bellows forcing huge volumes of air through heavy architectural lead and wood pipes.
It is synonymous with massive physical structures, ancient religion, and the overwhelming, booming voice of the divine.
The flute is Ophilia the traumatized orphan. The pipe organ is the suffocating, crushing weight of the legacy of St. Bridge Cathedral bearing down on her shoulders.
And the interplay between them, the way the flute desperately weaves its fragile human melody in and out of those massive, oppressive organ chords.
It is the exact sound of her trying to preserve her humanity while carrying the weight of a god's expectations.
So what does this all mean? When you were playing the game and her theme swells in the background, you aren't just listening to a pretty ambient track.
Designed to make you feel holy, right?
You are listening to a musical panic attack dressed up in clerical robes.
You are hearing a young woman desperately, frantically trying to convince herself that her fragile flute of a heart is strong enough to carry the architectural weight of the pipe organ.
It perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of her existence. It is auditory trauma and auditory grace occurring in the exact same sonic space.
The narrative team and the audio team clearly built this character from the exact same psychological blueprint.
Every element, from the geopolitical lore of the Frostlands to the harmonic friction of an Ad-11 chord, points toward the exact same thematic climax.
And we need to look closely at that climax, because all of these threads converge in the final acts.
Right, the trauma of her childhood, the compensation mechanism driving her pilgrimage.
The philosophical war with Mattias's nihilism and the agonizing tension of the music.
They all culminate in the cycle of salvation, because her journey does reach a definitive conclusion.
She arrives right back where she started, but with a fundamentally transformed understanding of how miracles actually work.
The climax of her narrative arc doesn't center on defeating a physical monster, though there is certainly combat involved.
The true emotional climax is whether or not she can save her sister.
Ophilia successfully completes the pilgrimage, faces down the darkness Mattias has unleashed, and finally reaches Liana.
And Liana is standing on the absolute precipice of despair. Her father is dead.
Her mind is broken by grief, and she is inches away from succumbing to the exact same darkness that consumed Mattias.
But let's look at the mechanism of how Ophilia saves her. Because Ophilia doesn't cast a massive holy spell.
She doesn't use the sacred flame to miraculously resurrect Archbishop Joseph. She doesn't preach theology at Liana.
No, she uses the most powerful tool she possesses, shared vulnerability.
Let's look at the elegant, cyclical symmetry of this moment. 15 years ago, Ophilia was the one locked in the darkness.
Consumed by the absolute cold of the mental ice cellar, she was drowning in the trauma of loss.
And who was it that reached into that terrifying, freezing dark?
It was Liana, a young Liana, who didn't understand the depth of the trauma, but simply refused to let her new sister freeze.
Liana reached into the ice, grabbed Ophilia's hand, and dragged her toward the warmth.
And now, 15 years later, the roles are perfectly, tragically reversed.
Liana is the one entombed in the ice of her own grief. She is paralyzed by the cold.
And Ophilia, having spent a decade and a half desperately trying to earn the right to exist in the warmth, realizes what she actually must do.
She doesn't pull rank as the savior of the flame. She steps directly back into the ice cellar with Liana.
She mirrors Liana's current agony with her own past agony.
She essentially says, I know exactly how suffocating this cold is. I know the gods are silent right now, but I am here.
She takes the warmth she was freely given all those years ago, the warmth she cultivated through sheer, agonizing willpower, and she passes it back.
The cycle of empathy closes.
It is a perfect closed loop of human solidarity. And this is the grand thesis of the entire narrative.
Throughout the world of Orstera, you have grand tales of Elfric the Flamebringer and Galdera the Fallen.
Of massive 20-year rituals and divine, earth-shattering interventions.
But the true, tangible moments of salvation in this story, they are never divine.
The gods did not descend from the heavens to save Ophilia from the war 15 years ago.
And the sacred flame itself possesses absolutely no magical power to cure Liana's shattering grief in the present.
The miracles in this narrative are entirely aggressively terrestrial.
They are the result of mortal, deeply flawed, heavily traumatized human beings simply choosing to step into the cold for one another.
The grand miracle isn't the preservation of the world's light. The grand miracle is just a sister refusing to let go of another sister's hand in the dark.
It completely demystifies the concept of holiness. It strips away the magic and reveals the profound, exhausting labor of human empathy.
Holiness isn't about channeling magical fire from the sky. Holiness is about the solidarity of the broken. We are the miracle.
It's an incredibly potent humanist message, wrapped in the aesthetic of a classic fantasy religion.
It takes this massive, epic JRPG world with all its deep lore and sprawling conspiracies and boils the absolute most important truth down to the quietest, most intimate human connection imaginable.
And as we wrap up our time dissecting Ophilia and the freezing expanse of the Frostlands, it is genuinely staggering to remember that this masterclass in character study is just 1/8 of the overall story.
The continent of Orstera is vast, and the philosophies it holds are wildly diverse.
We have only explored one facet of the human experience here, the realm of faith, grief, and emotional resilience.
Exactly. We've spent an hour swimming in the emotional truth of the heart.
To truly understand the full scope of this world, we will eventually need to travel away from the snowdrifts of St. Bridge and head to the Flatlands.
We need to transition from the intuitive realm of the soul to the sharp empirical realm of the intellect.
We need to meet the scholar, Cyrus Albright, a man who dissects the world with the cold, hard blade of logic.
The contrast between Ophilia's desperate faith and Cyrus's relentless pursuit of academic truth is going to be a fascinating collision of worldviews.
But we will crack open his psychological profile on another day.
The shift from emotional instinct to rigorous deduction will be a brilliant whiplash to explore.
I cannot wait to tear into his narrative.
Yeah.
But for today, we must bring our journey with the Cleric to a close.
Right.
I want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We started by looking at a character who seemed like a simplistic, two-dimensional trope on a stained glass window.
But by looking closely at the lead holding the glass together, we uncovered a profound exploration of childhood trauma.
The grueling, daily reality of imposter syndrome, the terrible philosophical danger of demanding miracles from a silent universe.
And the ultimate restorative power of human solidarity.
We saw how a fantastical character's journey provides an uncomfortably clear mirror for our own coping mechanisms.
Our own transactional views of love and our own desperate search for belonging.
It is heavy, complex narrative architecture, but it is the exact kind of depth that elevates video games to the highest echelons of storytelling.
Before we let you go, though, I actually have one final lingering thread for you to pull on.
Oh, do you? Let's hear it.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Something that takes the philosophical thesis we just established and pushes it to its ultimate, perhaps slightly unsettling conclusion.
Okay, lay it on us.
We have firmly established that the true miracles in Ophilia's story, her survival, Liana's salvation, came entirely from human warmth.
The mechanism of salvation was the cyclical nature of empathy between two mortal women.
If we accept that as the fundamental truth of this world, if human connection is the only actual mechanism of salvation, does the grand, monumental 20-year ritual of the kindling actually matter at all?
Oh, man.
Think deeply about it. Does a lone cleric physically carrying a lantern of fire across a continent actually prevent the world from ending.
Or is that just a myth they tell themselves to stave off the terror of the void?
Consider the possibility that the massive institutions we build, the towering cathedrals of St. Bridge, the heavy vestments, the elaborate rituals we perform to honor the light.
Perhaps they are all secretly just placebos.
Maybe they hold absolutely no divine magical power whatsoever.
Maybe humanity intuitively designed these massive, complex religious frameworks simply to give ourselves an excuse.
A structured, undeniable mandate to be good to one another in an otherwise freezing, indifferent universe.
You invent gods just so we have a grand cosmic reason to hold each other's hands in the dark?
It's worth thinking about.
That is a staggering proposition. Is the entirety of the religious lore just scaffolding for human empathy? I love that thought.
It brings it all together.
And that brings us perfectly, symmetrically, right back to where we started. The cold of the world, whether it is the literal biting wind of the Frostlands or the silent, arbitrary cruelty of the universe, is always going to be there.
The architecture of ice is always waiting, threatening to build itself in our minds the moment we experience loss.
But whether prompted by a divine mandate from the heavens or just a desperate human placebo we've agreed upon to survive,
The choice to strike a match and share the warmth is entirely beautifully ours.
thank you so much for exploring this with us. Keep questioning the tropes, keep looking for the shattered glass behind the beautiful window, and keep questioning the stories you consume. We will see you next time.